The sound of the organ echoed through a sea. Mary's Cathedral on the outskirts of Boston, each solemn note pounding against my chest like invisible hammers. I stood there right in front of the altar in my hand-sewn ivory wedding gown, my hands trembling as I gripped the bouquet. More than 180 faces were turned toward me. Family, friends, colleagues, people who had flown across the country to witness my big day. Everyone was waiting for the moment I would officially become Adrian Cole's wife. Morning light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting vibrant rainbow patterns across the marble floor. It should have been a dreamlike scene, a fairy tale ending for a 28-year-old woman like me, Celestine Harper, who had worked tirelessly for everything I had achieved. But my heart wasn't racing with happiness. It was being crushed by a devastating secret, a truth that could shatter me and my family in front of hundreds of people. My eyes drifted toward the front row. My mother, Evelyn, in a jade silk dress, smiling radiantly like the perfect image of maternal pride. Beside her, my father, Reverend Thomas Harper, sat quietly, his hands folded neatly on his lap, his posture as solemn as every wedding he had officiated for young couples in our community. If it had been 24 hours earlier, I might have believed that smile. If it had been just yesterday, I still would have believed that love was sacred, that parents would always stand by their children. But now, as the music swelled, I knew it was nothing more than a glittering facade. Adrian, the man standing next to me in a flawless tuxedo, his deep blue eyes brimming with confidence, was the dream of every girl in town. He was 33, an attorney at one of the most prestigious firms in downtown Boston, the only son of Judge Richard Cole. People called him the Golden Boy of Massachusetts. Successful, handsome, and from an elite family. He drove a sleek black Mercedes and had once knelt to propose to me during a ballet performance at the Opera House, under a blaze of glittering lights. The entire community congratulated me, saying I was lucky that I was about to have a perfect life. My mother even cried when she saw the sparkling engagement ring on my finger. She hugged me and whispered, "You did well, Celestine. The Cole family is the pride of this city." At the time it felt like praise. But looking back, I realize she never once mentioned my happiness, only ambition. My father, Reverend Thomas, was gentler. He had once told me in the warm voice that had guided his congregation for more than 25 years, "Adrian is a good man. I see love in his eyes, and more importantly, I see that you truly love him too." Those words had convinced me I'd found my other half, that this wedding would be the happiest day of my life. For the past 3 months, everything revolved around the wedding. My mother, with her controlling nature, had taken charge of nearly every detail, from the white roses lining the aisle to the full orchestra instead of the string quartet I wanted. When I suggested writing my own vows, she dismissed the idea instantly. "Tradition will make the ceremony more elegant. Trust me, I know what's best for you." I gave in, thinking she only wanted the best. But now, standing here in this cathedral, I understood there were hidden motives behind every "I know best." Adrian blended seamlessly into my family. He often came over for dinner, talking with my father about law and ethics, while with my mother, he always knew how to make her laugh for hours. I remembered one time he praised her cooking so much, saying, "No restaurant could compare," and her eyes lit up in a way I couldn't quite place. Back then, I felt happy they were getting along. I never imagined. I once believed love would open the door to heaven. But when I looked into my mother's proud face and Adrian's confident gaze, all I saw was an abyss waiting to swallow me whole. And I knew in just a few minutes, when the priest began reading the vows, this cathedral would no longer be a place of blessings, but the stage for a devastating truth. 3 weeks before the wedding, I began noticing odd details, things I might have overlooked before. Honestly, I was too caught up in love and the whirlwind of preparations to stop and question them. But one by one, the signs appeared, small and subtle, yet sharp enough to chip away at my trust. My mother, Evelyn, still clung to her habit of controlling everything. She made dozens of phone calls each day to vendors. But what unsettled me most was how she and Adrian were spending more and more time alone together. Many evenings, after returning from the publishing house, I would walk into my parents' kitchen and find them side by side, laughing at something. The moment they saw me, their conversation would fall silent, replaced with some shallow remark, as if I had interrupted something far deeper. One Tuesday evening, I stopped by to discuss the seating chart. The kitchen was filled with a strong scent of men's cologne, Nothing like my father's simple taste. He never wore such expensive fragrances. I asked, Mom, why does the house smell like a different cologne? She chuckled softly and replied quickly, Oh, it must be from your father's guest. He just dropped by before heading to a church meeting. It sounded plausible, but her eyes shifted away. I forced a smile, telling myself not to doubt her. My mother, who had cared for me since childhood, how could she possibly? A week later, Adrian suddenly canceled our cake tasting. He said he had urgent work at the firm. I was used to his busy schedule, so I tried to be understanding. But that afternoon, while passing through downtown to buy books, I unexpectedly spotted his car parked near a small cafe. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure, silky brown hair, a refined dress. My mother. My heart skipped a beat. I froze on the sidewalk, and just as I was about to step inside, they slipped away. I stood frozen in the busy street, convincing myself it was just a harmless meeting. Maybe Mom and Adrian were simply discussing the wedding plans for me. But the look in their eyes as they left the cafe carried something hard to name, an expression that only exists between two people sharing a secret. Another evening, I went to Adrian's apartment in Cambridge. He had said he was tired and wanted to rest, but something in my gut told me I needed to go. When I knocked and no one answered, I used my spare key. The apartment was dark, but on the living room table sat a wine glass stained with deep red lipstick. I never wore that color. None of my friends did either. My throat tightened. I stepped toward the bedroom, but the door was locked. I knocked softly. Adrian, are you in there? After a long pause, his voice came out hoarse. I'm not feeling well, must be a cold. Don't come in, you might catch it. He had never refused my care when sick before. Even with a simple headache, Adrian wanted me nearby. But that night he pushed me away awkwardly. I stood silently at the door, gripping the key so tightly that blood welled at the crease of my palm. The next day I told my mother vaguely that Adrian had been acting strange. She quickly reassured me, men get stressed before weddings, Celestine. Don't start doubting him. You'll just make everything messy. I nodded, but unease still gnawed at me. Especially when I caught her constantly glancing at her phone, smiling faintly, then hastily putting it away whenever I walked closer. I began to replay everything from the start. The time she insisted on choosing my wedding gown, the way Adrian complimented her in front of others, the seemingly innocent glances they exchanged. Strung together, they painted a blurry but terrifying picture. Still, I clung to trust. I told myself I was being paranoid, that true love wouldn't be shaken by fragments of doubt. I wanted to believe my mother was still my rock, that Adrian was still the man of my life. Yet deep inside, a voice whispered, Celestine, they're hiding something from you. And this truth could destroy everything. I didn't know then that these strange signs were only the beginning of the real storm. And once the curtain fell, none of us would ever go back to how things were. Just 2 days before the wedding, Boston basked in late autumn sunlight, maple trees painting the street to my parents' home in shades of red. I drove over to pick up extra invitations that Mom said she had left in her car. A trivial errand, it seemed, but one that would change my life forever. Her silver SUV was parked neatly in the driveway. I used my spare key to unlock the door. Sure enough, a large brown envelope lay on the passenger seat, exactly as she had said. But when I bent to grab it, I noticed a black leather journal wedged under the seat. What froze me was the name Celestine, written on the cover, in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. My heart pounded so hard I could hear the echo in my chest. Curiosity mixed with dread as I opened it. On the very first page, the date was clear. 3 months ago, just weeks after Adrian had proposed. Line by line, my mother's words pierced me like icy knives. Adrian Cole is the man I should have married 30 years ago. Noble, brilliant, captivating. And yet I buried my life with Thomas in a dull marriage. But perhaps it's never too late to feel alive again. I trembled as I turned the page. Her tidy handwriting described their meetings in detail. At a cafe by the Charles River, at Adrian's law office, even the times he came to our house when my father was away. Today he touched my hand, his eyes lit up as if I were the only woman alive. My heart awakened feelings long dead. I know this is wrong, but I don't want to stop. I swallowed hard, trying to tell myself it was fantasy, the diary of a woman lost in delusion. But the more I read, the more brutal the truth became. Another page said, Adrian stayed after Celestine left. We talked for hours about books, about traveling. He told me I deserved a greater life than this small-town suburb. I know I've crossed the line. Today we kissed. And I don't want to go back anymore. My hands went cold, sweat running down my spine. Still, I kept turning the pages, though each word twisted my stomach tighter. And then came the final blow. He took me to the apartment in Cambridge. We were together as if time had stopped. Adrian said that after marrying Celestine he would keep seeing me. He said marriage is only a social duty, but true love belongs to us. I clutched the journal so tightly my nails dug into the leather cover. In my head one phrase thundered: they betrayed you. Your own mother and the man about to call you his wife. Finally, the most recent entry written just one day earlier. Tomorrow Thomas will be busy with a church meeting, Adrian will come over. This will be our last night before the girl puts on her wedding dress. After that, we must be more discreet. But how can we stop when we've already fallen too deep? I dropped the journal onto the seat, the whole world spinning around me. Outside the car, everything looked normal. Neighbors mowing their lawns, children playing, the autumn breeze drifting gently. Everything was too peaceful while my heart was exploding. I cried, but tears did nothing to ease the pain. They were salty, burning, blurring the pages. But the confessions were already carved into my mind. In that moment I understood. My mother and Adrian had chosen each other, not me. Love, trust, devotion, all just a cruel joke. I sat frozen in the car for nearly an hour, then finally took a deep breath and wiped my tears. The pain slowly gave way to cold clarity. I remembered my father's words: the truth will set you free even if it hurts. And I decided I would not stay silent. I would not let them turn me into a puppet at the altar. If my mother and Adrian could stage a perfect play, then I would be the one to pull down the curtain when the audience was fullest. That night I didn't go home. I rented a room in a small downtown hotel, paid in cash and checked in under a false name. On the bed I spread out every piece of evidence. The journal, Adrian's contradictory text messages, credit card receipts for expensive wine, the very kind my mother loved. Every detail I once ignored now cut sharp as a blade. I knew I had to prepare carefully because this truth wouldn't just cost me a husband, it could shatter my family's reputation. But I had no other choice. That night I sat in the hotel room, the yellow light casting shadows across the mirror. In it, a new Celestine began to emerge. Not the dreamy girl, but a woman determined to reclaim her dignity. And I swore on my wedding day in that very church before hundreds of people, I would reveal everything. I sat motionless in the Boston hotel room, evidence spread before me. My mother's black leather journal, copies of credit card bills matching her favorite indulgences, and a few blurry photos of the times I caught them together where they had no reason to be. The silence was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat, slow but heavy. Less than 48 hours remained before the wedding. They must have thought I was still blind, ready to stand at the altar with a foolish smile in the gown my mother chose. But no. They chose deceit, I chose the truth. And I would make the entire church see who they really were. I picked up my phone and dialed Maya Patel, my best friend from college, now a freelance journalist for an online paper in New York. When she answered, her voice bubbled with excitement. "Oh my gosh, Celestine, the wedding is almost here. You must be so excited, right?" I swallowed hard, summoning my courage. "Maya, I need you to see. Mary's on Saturday morning. Bring your camera, video recorder, and your press badge." Silence stretched on the other end for a few seconds. Then Maya spoke softly. "The way you sound, what's going on? Just trust me. There's a truth that needs to be recorded. A truth I can't hide any longer." Maya sighed, then agreed. I knew she didn't ask more because years of friendship had taught her. If I said the truth, it meant something serious. The next call was harder. I dialed my father, Pastor Thomas, likely still at the church office preparing for Sunday's sermon. When his warm, familiar voice came on, my eyes burned. "Celestine, why are you calling at this hour? You shouldn't worry so much. Everything will be fine." I forced my voice steady. "Dad, tomorrow I'm going to tell everything. But I need you to be ready because what's coming may hurt you more than anything ever has." "Sweetheart, you're scaring me. Tell me, what is it?" I gripped the journal tight but couldn't bring myself to reveal it over the phone. I only whispered, "Dad, just remember I love you. And what you're about to see is not your fault." Please don't blame yourself. On the other end, I heard his heavy breathing. After a long pause, he said, Celestine, I trust you. Whatever happens, I'll be by your side. Hearing those words gave me strength. I knew I wouldn't be alone when I spoke the truth. That night, I drafted my plan step by step. Arrive at the church on time like any bride. Stay silent through the ceremony. Let Mom and Adrian think everything was going smoothly. Wait until the moment the priest read the vows. Then speak out. Maya would record it all, ensuring no one could deny it. I even sent an email to my assistant at the publishing house, asking her to gather the full list of emails and phone numbers of every guest. Just to make sure everyone has the information they need, I claimed. But deep down, I knew I was preparing for a fatal blow. If necessary, the truth would spread instantly. Late at night, when the city lay under pale yellow lights, I stepped onto the hotel balcony. The icy wind whipped through my hair, but inside me rose a strange calm, not panic but a steely peace. I remembered my childhood when my father taught me that justice wasn't always gentle. Often it was painful but necessary. And now I understood more than ever. I wasn't seeking mere revenge. I wanted to expose the truth so no one else would be deceived, so I wouldn't be turned into a puppet in a family play. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from my mother. Tomorrow will be perfect, sweetheart. The flowers have been delivered to the church, they're stunning. Don't forget breakfast tomorrow, you'll need the energy for your big day. Every word was a sweet but poisonous blade. I glanced at them, then locked the screen without replying. Before bed, I placed the black leather journal on the nightstand as living proof. I whispered to myself, tomorrow every mask will fall. That entire night, I barely closed my eyes, but there were no tears left. Only the cold gaze of a woman who had chosen her path. I was no longer the dreamy girl in a wedding gown. I was Celestine Harper, walking into the church not to marry, but to speak the truth that would silence everyone. Saturday morning, Boston's sky was impossibly clear, as though nature itself was blessing a great day. Mary stood in solemn majesty, stained glass windows scattering light onto the old wooden pews. Guests arrived in elegant dresses and tailored suits, laughter and chatter filling the air. They had no idea they were about to witness the unimaginable. I wore the ivory gown with pearl buttons running down to my waist, the dress my mother had insisted on. But today it was no symbol of innocence or joy. It was armor guarding my heart. As bridesmaids adjusted my veil, I studied myself in the mirror. Deep blue eyes, calm and unshaken. I knew I was ready. My father, Pastor Thomas, entered the preparation room. He took my hand, his eyes wet but firm. Sweetheart, you're not alone. I'll walk with you. I nodded. Just that simple gesture filled me with warmth. At least I still had him. When the grand doors opened, music swelled and everyone stood. Step by step, I walked the red carpet, camera flashes bursting, whispers of admiration floating around me. At the altar, Adrian stood tall in his tuxedo, smiling with confidence. And in the front pew, my mother, Evelyn, sat gracefully in her teal dress, tears glistening like the picture of maternal pride. They were masterful actors, I thought, lips curling into a faint smile. My father placed my hand into Adrian's. His grip was warm, but to me it was only ice. The priest's voice echoed solemnly. We gather here to witness the sacred union of Adrian Cole and Celestine Harper. I listened closely, waiting for the moment. Adrian, do you take to love, honor, and remain faithful until death do you part? Adrian met my eyes, his voice steady. I do. The church exhaled in relief. Smiles and approving nods spread among the crowd. Then the priest turned to me. Celestine, do you? This was it. I drew a long breath, pulled my hand from Adrian's and let my voice ring out, clear and unwavering like a bell. Actually, before I answer, I have something to say to everyone here. The church fell silent. The music stopped. From the corner of my eye, I saw Maya at the back, camera raised, her face tense. I turned to face more than 180 guests. Today, you came to witness love and unity. But it would be a sin if I stayed silent. Because the truth is, my fiancé Adrian has betrayed me. And the person he chose to betray me with is my mother. Gasps erupted. Whispers, sharp intakes of breath, some even stood in shock. Adrian froze, his face drained of color. My mother's handkerchief slipped to the floor, her lips trembling. I continued, my voice cutting cold. This is not an empty accusation. I found my mother's journal, detailing every meeting, every promise. I know he was with her last night while my father was away at a church meeting. I also have receipts for expensive wine, her favorite, purchased with our credit card. It's all real. My father rose to his feet, his face torn with pain but firm with truth. Evelyn, that's enough. Our daughter speaks the truth. You have betrayed this family. His words cut like a blade. My mother burst into tears, collapsing onto the pew, unable to hold on to her usual grace. Adrian stammered, voice choked. Celestine, please let me explain. It's not what you think. I turned, staring straight into his eyes, cold and sharp. Then explain. Explain to your father, Judge Richard, and to this entire community why you chose to sleep with your fiancé's mother. Explain yourself, Adrian. The sanctuary erupted in whispers. Adrian's father, sitting a few rows back, his face red with fury, slammed his cane against the floor. Adrian Cole, I am ashamed to have a son like you. I turned to my mother, the woman who once had been my perfect role model. Mother, I understand your hunger to be loved. But to trade it for crushing your own daughter? For destroying this family. She cried out, but her words were nothing more than broken sobs. I drew a deep breath, scanning the faces fixed on me. Friends, colleagues, neighbors who had watched me grow up. None of them looked at me with pity. What I saw instead was empathy, respect. I knew I had done the right thing. I closed with these words. Today is not the day I marry. Today is the day I choose the truth. Today I choose myself. Then I turned, walking straight down the aisle. My gown rustled, whispers rising behind me. My father came forward, laid a hand on my shoulder, his eyes brimming but glowing with pride. Daughter, I am proud of you. I held his hand, stepped out through the great wooden doors. Behind me the noise, shouts, cries, arguments faded. Outside, sunlight poured down, bright and unyielding, as if granting me a new beginning. I walked into the parking lot, my heavy wedding gown trailing behind me. The doors shut, sealing the chaos inside. Out here the air was strangely calm. I breathed deeply, and for the first time in months, I felt as though I had stepped out of a gilded cage. My phone vibrated endlessly. Messages, calls from friends, relatives, even distant acquaintances. I answered only one. Maya. Celestine, I recorded everything. Not a single second missed. This video is going to spread fast. Are you okay? I closed my eyes, voice firm. Maya, let the world see it. No one should stay silent in the face of betrayal like this. And just as I expected, within hours the footage appeared on social media. First shared among friends, then spreading to local news sites. By that evening, it was on the front page of the Boston Herald under the headline, Bride exposes groom and her own mother at the altar. Adrian Cole's reputation collapsed overnight. The law firm where he worked immediately suspended him, and days later announced his resignation. No firm would dare hire a man who betrayed his fiancée and disgraced an entire community. His father, Judge Richard Cole, appeared before reporters, face ashen, offering only, I am utterly devastated. This is the shame of my family. As for my mother, Evelyn Harper, her life shattered like glass. Once the proud president of 3 charities, she was asked to step down for the sake of the organizations. Her circle of friends abandoned her, whispering cruel words behind her back. Her phone stayed silent. Neighbors eyed her as if she were a stranger. I later learned my father, Pastor Thomas, had submitted his resignation to the congregation. He told me one late evening as we sat in his study, shelves lined with theology books, I cannot stand at the pulpit speaking of faithfulness and holiness when my own wife has destroyed it all. The church deserves someone new. He looked at me, sorrow etched deep but also a quiet peace. I've been invited to a small church in Vermont, only temporary, but I think the peace there will help. Perhaps it's time for a new beginning. I held his hand, seeing him as simply a man for the first time, not an untouchable pastor. I whispered, You haven't lost anything. You still have me. And you taught me to be brave. That's why today I didn't bow my head. A few days later, I watched my mother pack her things and leave the house she once flaunted. She moved in with her sister in Baltimore. My father filed for divorce, a step I never imagined he would take. 30 years of family life, gone like smoke. Me. I didn't return to the apartment in Cambridge. I rented a small place in downtown Boston, near the publishing office. I took a 3-month leave of absence, then accepted a job offer from a major publishing house in New York. I wanted to leave it all behind, the pitying stares, the hushed whispers. The day I left Boston, only my father came to the station. He hugged me tight, his shoulders trembling but his voice steady. "Celestine, you haven't lost your future. You've just reclaimed it." In New York, I started fresh. The work was demanding but full of challenge. I buried myself in manuscripts, in books. And whenever exhaustion weighed me down, I stepped onto the balcony, looking at the city lights, reminding myself, I chose this path, one of freedom without lies. The exposé video kept spreading for weeks, becoming the subject of countless debates. But instead of shame, I received thousands of messages from strangers. "Thank you for your courage. Your story gave me the strength to leave a toxic marriage. You proved that truth is always stronger than lies." Each line was medicine, reminding me that my decision wasn't just for myself, but also for those who couldn't yet raise their voices. When winter came, I arranged my new apartment with a small potted plant, a desk buried in books and plenty of light. On the desk, I placed only one photo. Me and my father on that unfinished wedding day, walking together, heads held high. I knew that was the true beginning. I wasn't the abandoned bride, nor the pitiful daughter. I was Celestine Harper, the woman who dared to choose truth, even when the cost was losing both family and what had seemed like perfect love. And I believed that from the wreckage I would rebuild a stronger life, with my own hands and my own pride. The following spring, I stood in the small garden behind my new apartment in New York. Cherry blossoms bloomed, pale pink petals drifting onto the porch like a gentle rain. Holding a cup of hot coffee, I realized how far I'd come since the day I walked out of that church in my wedding gown, leaving hundreds in stunned silence. Those first months in the city were not easy. I spent sleepless nights asking myself if I had been wrong to expose everything. But then, message by message, email by email from across the country, I had my answer. Women of all ages from many states shared their stories of betrayed marriages, false loves, broken families. They wrote, "Thank you, Celestine, for choosing truth. Because of you, I dared to choose myself." I began to feel less alone. From a victim of betrayal, I slowly became a symbol of something greater. Not because I was perfect, but because I refused to stay silent. And in this world, silence can be the heaviest chain of all. 3 months later, I received an invitation from the National Literary Association. They were holding their annual conference at the Grand Manhattan Hotel, with the theme, "The Honest Voice of Women in Modern Literature." They wanted me, a book editor and now a living witness to the power of truth, to speak at the opening ceremony. On the day of the conference, I stood before hundreds of faces. Writers, readers, publishers, and ordinary women searching for inspiration. On the table before me, a small card read, "Celestine Harper, guest speaker." I took a deep breath, my voice carrying through the microphone. 1 year ago, I stood in a church, ready to speak my wedding vows. But instead of saying, "I do," I told the truth. A truth that silenced an entire community. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it so I wouldn't make myself a partner to lies. Some in the audience nodded, some wiped tears. I went on. "I've learned that true happiness doesn't come from a fairy tale wedding, but from the freedom to choose your own path. When you dare to choose truth, you don't just free yourself, you give others the courage to do the same." Applause thundered through the hall. I glanced at the front row and saw Maya smiling, camera in hand. My best friend, who had been there from the moment the tragedy exploded, still stood by my side as I reclaimed my voice. After my speech, dozens of women came forward to embrace me, whispering thanks. One middle-aged woman held my hand, eyes red. "Your story gave me the strength to leave the man who belittled me for 20 years. Thank you for saving me from silence." I hugged her, throat tight. For the first time, I realized my wound had become medicine for someone else. That evening, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window overlooking the city lights. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. "I watched your speech on livestream. You made me proud. You've proven that true strength lies in standing on the side of truth." I smiled through tears, but they were no longer tears of pain, only of relief. My father now lived peacefully in Vermont, in a small, simple church. He had found serenity and I had found my voice. A week later, a bouquet arrived at my apartment. Not roses, not lilies, but wildflowers, just like the ones I had once dreamed of for my wedding. The card read, "For the one who dared to choose herself, from someone who knows what that feels like." No signature. But I didn't need to know. Somewhere out there, others were walking the same road, choosing freedom over deceit. I understood then that happily ever after didn't mean a lavish wedding, a sparkling gown, or a picture-perfect home. Real happiness is standing tall, letting go of what hurts you and rebuilding life with truth and self-respect. I raised a glass of red wine at the window, looking out over the glowing city, whispering to myself, Celestine Harper didn't lose everything. She just began. And I knew my story would continue, not as a tragedy, but as proof that sometimes, liberation is the first chapter of true happiness. The story of Celestine Harper did not end with a ruined wedding day. It stands as proof of the power of truth and dignity. From a girl who seemed to lose everything, Celestine turned pain into a beginning, daring to speak, daring to choose herself. In today's world, her story is a reminder. Happiness doesn't always come from a fairy tale ending, but from the courage to let go of what's false, and to start a journey that is free, honest, and worthy. What do you think of Celestine's choice to speak the truth on her wedding day? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about love, family, and life lessons.